Welcome to the English Epics channel. As with everyone, social distancing has changed my life. A year ago, I held the whole world by the throat. I had an amazing, intelligent, cheerful, and beautiful wife, a family that cared for me, a well-paying job with steady career potential. Friends I could trust with my life. So how do you start doubting yourself and everything happening in your life? You realize that what you thought was reliable turns out to be far less solid than you expected. As the fear of COVID began to spread, each state decided to adopt its own measures to handle the crisis. Since the federal government was not interested in implementing a nationwide lockdown, the states were left to fend for themselves. Each state acted according to its own political agenda. Those inclined toward liberalism began shutting things down, while those leaning toward conservatism kept everything open. We took some satisfaction in the fact that the governor closed everything, while the state legislature and judges tried to force a reopening. But until that happened, everything remained shut, and gatherings of more than 20 people were prohibited, unless of course you decided to protest. Protest activities were still allowed. If you can make any sense of this logic, you're doing better than I am. Since our fearless governor and health advisor didn't consider us essential, we set up our new workspaces in our previously established home office. Fortunately, it required almost no physical changes, only adjustments to accommodate our seamless work schedules with the demands of various online meetings and assignments for the kids. 2 out of 3 children had active teachers who regularly assigned tasks. However, one of them had a lazy teacher who barely gave any assignments and mostly took time off until the end of the semester. Strictly adhering to our schedule became essential as we managed our responsibilities for teaching, parenting, and working to the best of our abilities. Most of the time, one of us would handle teaching or parenting while the other focused on work, and then we would switch roles. Friday evenings became golden work hours as the kids finished their weekly projects. Once they were done with schoolwork, they connected to their chosen digital devices, allowing both of us to work simultaneously with minimal interruptions. So, Sarah and I had a rare moment together in the office. She's a mid-level manager responsible for about 10 people with whom she has to communicate quite regularly. On Fridays, they held weekly meetings to ensure everyone was aware of what was happening and prepared for the upcoming week. This was one of those typical meetings. Those who performed well were congratulated, while those who fell below acceptable standards were either gently encouraged if it was an isolated incident or asked to stay after the meeting for a one-on-one consultation, which usually meant they were in serious trouble. Andrea was one of Sarah's less successful employees, which was understandable, given that Andrea had been hired for her looks rather than her sharp intellect. Back when face-to-face meetings were common, her stunning appearance made complete business sense. Guys would get distracted by her looks and might decide to place an order just to see her again. Silly, but it worked. This skill set becomes irrelevant when there are no in-person meetings and you actually need to know what you're talking about to make a sale. Sexual appeal is much harder to sell over video than in close proximity. Andrea didn't have the best skill set, so she was always on the list of underperformers, and today was no exception. I smiled, listening as Sarah spoke about her disappointment in Andrea's work. Despite Sarah's efforts to stay positive, everyone in the Zoom meeting knew Andrea was in trouble when Sarah told her to stay after the meeting. "Of course, Sarah, I'll wait," Andrea replied, her tone filled with disappointment. That should have been the end of it, but as often happens to most of us at some point after finishing a video conference, we forget to mute ourselves. I don't know who Andrea was talking to, maybe just herself. But she let her emotions run wild, completely unaware that her microphone was still on. That self-righteous adulteress is yelling at me for screwing up a little. I wonder how confident she'd be if I told her husband she slept with Cory at the last conference. My head immediately snapped up from the computer, and I looked at my previously loving wife as her eyes widened and her mouth fell open in shock. You could hear the reactions of her team members, "Oh my God, shut up," and even "No way, this can't be real." I stood up from the table and walked over to the Zoom screen. "Thank you, Andrea. If possible, I'd like to have a little chat with you about my wife's relationship with Cory." I gave Andrea my mobile number and email address while Sarah just sat there, completely shocked by what had just happened. "You probably don't need to wait after the call, either," I said to Andrea. "I think Sarah has other issues to deal with right now, so she'll probably talk to you later." Sarah began. "Before you start down the path of excuses," I interrupted, "let's take this to the bedroom so we can discuss it while you pack your things." I saw her glance nervously at her computer, then turn and follow me as I walked out of the office. Once in the bedroom, I reached under the bed and pulled out her suitcase. Pack everything you'll need to live at your parents' house for the foreseeable future. John, I'm so sorry. It was a one-time thing. I was celebrating and drank too much after receiving the award for saving the Collins deal. I swear. It only happened once, and I've felt so guilty ever since. Of course you feel guilty. That's why you told me about it as soon as you got home, right? Pack your stuff and go to your parents' house. I'll even call them to let them know you're coming. Taking out my phone, I called my father-in-law, and he picked up after the second ring. Wasn't it great how Brady played horribly last weekend? Best day in years. It was amusing to watch, but unfortunately I have a serious problem and need your help. It seems your daughter has a boyfriend, something I just found out about. While I figure out what's going on, could she stay with you and Jackie for a while? This isn't funny, John. No, Tom, I wish I were joking. Talk to her yourself. I handed the phone to Sarah, who looked at it as though it were a live grenade. She slowly brought it to her ear. I'm sorry, Dad. While Jackie was a retired English teacher, Tom clearly had a mastery of cursing that would have impressed a Navy chief petty officer. As he tore into Sarah, I continued packing her clothes, then grabbed a small suitcase and moved on to her toiletries. A few minutes later, she handed me the phone, tears streaming down her face. So, is it okay if she stays for a while? I asked. Of course, Tom replied. Maybe I can knock some sense into this idiot. After a pause, he continued. Why are you so calm right now? Are you okay? I'm just in shock at the moment. What really worries me is that later I'll be angry, maybe even cruel to her. I think it's better for everyone if she's away for a few days while I figure out what's going on. She'll be leaving soon. Ending the call, I turned back to Sarah. I'll load this into your car and tell the kids you're leaving for a couple of days. Let me make my position crystal clear. You lied, so you're leaving. If this turns out to be an ongoing affair, you're gone for good. The only reason I'm not filing for divorce today is because of the kids. That gives you a little time before I call Dave for a recommendation for a divorce attorney. She stepped outside shortly after I finished loading her bags into the trunk of her car. The pain and guilt on her face clearly showed how much she regretted her actions, but unfortunately we were no longer the happy couple we had been just 30 minutes earlier. Damn, that it felt like my entire life was a lie, unraveling faster than I could have ordered a pizza. I realized I was in shock and had been operating on autopilot since Andrea opened her mouth that I quickly sent a message to my buddies, Bill and Ted, letting them know I wouldn't be able to meet up tonight. Their responses came quickly. She's got you by the throat. Grabbing a beer, I fired back. I wish she was holding me by the throat. A second later, I realized what I had written and could already imagine what would follow. That I called the neighbors and asked if the kids could spend the night at their place. I dropped the kids off and managed to return home without getting into a serious conversation with the neighbors. Shortly after I got back home, Bill showed up at my door. As I opened it to let him in, Ted pulled up in his beat-up pickup truck that we watched with a mix of curiosity and disbelief as Ted climbed into the bed of his truck and pulled out a shovel, garbage bags, and limes. Bill and I exchanged awkward glances, both clearly unsure of what to say. As Ted walked up to us. So, we're going to kill the adulteress, right? Ted said. Bill burst out laughing, and I couldn't help but join in. Ted just looked so utterly ridiculous. Bill asked him, what are you planning to do with the limes? Make her a margarita and poison her with booze? No, you idiot, Ted replied. I saw a documentary on YouTube about a Mexican cartel that used limes to get rid of bodies. You need lie, moron, Bill shot back. Got it. I saw this on YouTube. They dunked bodies in lime and it got rid of the skin, flesh, and everything else. There might be better distractions from feeling utterly miserable than listening to two people argue about something so ridiculous. But since Ted openly announced his intention to kill Sarah, it was probably best to get these two inside before the cops showed up, and I had to explain Ted's questionable choices. He's not calling you a liar, buddy, Bill said. He's just trying to tell you it's lie, not lime. Lie dissolves the body, just like you said. Really? Ted asked. Afraid so. Let's head inside and I'll explain what happened. While Ted busied himself making a margarita in the blender with his limes, I recounted the story of how I found out and everything I'd managed to do so far. Ted paused the blender for a moment to chime in. So this other chick just opened her mouth and you heard the whole thing? Man, that's rough. Does the talkative chick have big boobs or something? Maybe you could talk to her and then sleep with her to get even. I saw her at last year's Christmas party, and yeah, she's pretty hot. But I'm not ready to stoop to Sarah's level just yet. Bill grabbed the margarita, took a sip, and let out an approving sound. You should talk to the big boob chick and find out what she knows about Sarah's cheating. You need to know what you're dealing with before heading down the warpath. You're more likely to hear the truth from Sarah's enemies than her friends. If it was a one-time thing, it's a tough decision. But if it's an ongoing affair, then it's clear. Kick her out for good. Taking a sip of the margarita, I shook my head, amused at how limes had gone from a potential crime accessory to a tasty drink. All right, then I'll start by figuring things out. That's the right move. And if it happened more than once, you'll hook up with the big boob chick. Ted quipped. That I just laughed. Yeah, solid plan. Waking up the next morning with a headache, I took a couple of aspirin and got to work gathering information. Finding Andrea's phone number in Sarah's home office was easy enough, so I called her and asked to meet up for a conversation. Apologizing, Andrea agreed to meet me for a cup of coffee. The meeting with Andrea was insightful and gave me what I hoped to learn. Sarah had been emotional, careless with her drinking, and ended up having too much. Andrea saw her crying as she left Cory's room the following morning. Andrea even defended Sarah, which surprised me a little. She told me how much Sarah loves me. Andrea seemed embarrassed and regretful for unintentionally revealing the truth during the Zoom meeting. I appreciate you telling me. I'd rather have the ugly truth than a beautiful lie. I told her that I paid for the coffee and headed home. After picking up the kids and warmly thanking the neighbors, we went back to the house. While entertaining the kids, I tried to reflect on what I wanted. I was hurt and angry about what she had done, but before this, she had been an amazing wife and mother. Almost as if to confirm her good qualities, Sarah called during dinner. I know you hate me, but I just wanted to call and make sure you and the kids are okay. So, not only am I a terrible husband, but also an incompetent father. No, that's not what I meant at all. Peggy sent me a message saying to have fun last night while she watched the kids. I know I've caused you a lot of pain, and I just wanted to check if you're all right. Oh, did you have fun last night? Enjoy your free time with your lover? Sometimes I can't control myself, and petty remarks like that seem to make me feel a bit better in the moment. Yes, it's childish, but she started it. I spent the entire evening crying and telling my parents what a complete idiot I am and how I'm going to end up as a crazy divorcee with 100 cats. I couldn't help but smile knowing how much she despises cats. I'll never be able to express how deeply I regret what I did to us. Please, give me a chance to show you that I'm more than just an adulteress who made a really stupid mistake. I paused for a moment, thinking I had a rough idea of what I wanted to do, at least regarding her. Come back home tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk and figure out where we stand, but don't forget, the mistakes you made aren't limited to just one. Not telling me when you came back was just as bad. We'll talk, and I'll decide what I'm going to do. Really? Yes. But I need you to write down everything you did with him and anyone else you've been with. I need to understand the full extent of the problem I'm dealing with. So, if you've got any other skeletons in the closet, you better include them in that letter. Okay, should I email it or bring it with me? Both. And bring it with you. The kids didn't pay much attention to what was going on and easily accepted that Sarah was staying at her parents' house. Pizza and drinks in front of the TV helped them get through the evening. The next morning after breakfast, the kids and I went for a walk. As we strolled, I asked them various questions about school and sports. Toward the end of the walk, I asked each of them what they loved about their mom. I like how she reads me bedtime stories. I like your stories too, Dad, but Mom's are way better. Susie said that I couldn't help but laugh. Thanks. I guess second place isn't so bad. Then I turned to Janie. I love when she helps me with my math homework so I can get the answers right. Are you saying I'm bad at helping with math? No, Dad, it's just that she teaches it a little differently and it's easier for me to understand when she does it. It's like Mom and I think the same way. That's fair. What about you, Will? I like how she takes care of us. Not just the cleaning, which you both do, but the little things she does. The way she makes sure we know she loves us, even if we mess up sometimes. Like when someone decided to use her makeup as war paint. Yeah, she was upset, but I still knew she loved me. Lost in thought for a moment, I simply replied, yeah, that's true. When we got back home, Sarah was already there. The kids hugged her and disappeared. Sarah had always been the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, but right now she looked terrible. I walked up to her, hugged her, and held her tightly. Yes, I was angry at her. Yes, it was all her fault. But it wasn't about forgiving her mistake. It was about letting her feel a little more comfortable in an otherwise uncomfortable situation. I let her go and stepped back. Let's go outside and talk. When we sat down on the patio chairs, she placed a letter in front of me. I opened the envelope and began reading. She went into more detail than I would have liked about all the guys she had been with before we met. But most importantly, she told me everything about what happened with Cory, down to the smallest details. She admitted how ashamed she was of her stupidity. He didn't force her. He simply took advantage of the situation when they were both drunk. She admitted her failure. She even offered to take a lie detector test, but I told her not to bother. It would just be a waste of time. If she lied, we were done. She knew it, and so did I. We talked until lunchtime, and then again afterward. We agreed that marriage counseling might be a good idea. We decided to approach it as a way to tune up our marriage. We had experienced a crisis that nearly destroyed our relationship, but we needed to ensure nothing like it would ever happen again. Preventive maintenance can sometimes save you from accidents. Fortunately, with social distancing in place, Sarah wouldn't have to face her colleagues in person, sparing her from greater embarrassment than if she had to go into the office. On Monday, she called her boss and told him what had happened between her and Cory, as well as how it all came out during the Zoom meeting. Cory wasn't her supervisor, so it didn't violate the company's policy on workplace relationships. We both went about our routines, juggling work and parenting, until the day finally ended, and we could collapse from exhaustion. The next morning, I woke up in slightly lowered shorts, feeling pleasantly warm. I cupped her face in my hands as we made love. It wasn't angry or resentful sex, it was simply two people appreciating what they still had. We had done this hundreds of times before, but the stress we had been through made it feel different. We knew we were together, recognized how close we had come to the edge, and understood how far we still had to go. A week later, Cory went for a jog in the woods when he was accidentally bumped into by another runner. Cory tumbled down a hill into a thorny bush, leaving his skin covered in scratches. When he climbed back up to the trail, several passersby stopped to help. They didn't have a first aid kit, but they did have a few limes left over from lunch. Convincingly, they assured him that lime juice was a natural disinfectant. Cory screamed in pain as the acid started to clot his blood, causing a minor chemical burn. However, it did help stop the bleeding. Cory was writhing, screaming, and crying in pain as the guys walked away, unable to hear their conversation. Lemon lime is a good thing, one said. Yeah, did you know that alkaline stuff can also clean drains? I found some at Home Depot, the other replied. Good, because when John's done with that idiot, we might need it, along with your shovel. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of English Epics. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.